All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. We have Kirsten Engel is with us today. She is the Democratic candidate in CD6, Congressional District 6. The way we're setting this up is we have everybody's on mute except for myself and Kirsten. I'm going to start off asking questions and about specific issues. And as we go through, I would encourage the attendees to use the chat function and put in questions, and then we'll filter through them as we go. And I'll start off with Kirsten. What I would like is if you could just give us a brief, who is Kirsten Engel?
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you to the editorial board for hosting this forum this morning. And I'm looking forward to your questions and the questions from your readers. So Kirsten Engel, running for Congressional District 6. This is mostly what's been Ann Kirkpatrick's seat, but as a result of redistricting that happened and was just finalized back in January, the contours and the boundary lines have changed, and it's a very competitive seat here in Arizona. I am a mom. I am a University of Arizona law professor. I teach at the University of Arizona. That is what brought me here to Tucson. I'm also a former state legislator, having represented Midtown and Eastern Tucson in the Arizona State House and Senate for the past 5 years. I resigned from my state Senate seat in order to run for this race. And I love Arizona. I often talk about how my husband and I felt like we won the lottery when we got jobs here in Tucson. We just love being members of this community. I ended up running for public office really out of my concern for the quality and the funding of our public schools when we put my daughter into TUSD, public school here in Tucson, and I was volunteering at the school and very concerned when we were having trouble scraping together, money for field trips. And that's what caused me to run for the Arizona State House. And I also wanted to use my expertise as an environmental attorney and somebody who'd worked on clean energy issues, water and climate change, to work on those issues in the state as well. And now I am, laser focused on, the challenges that we face here in this state and in this district. And I believe that I can make a difference, and that's why I'm running. And I would list those, first and foremost, protecting women's fundamental freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, including the decision to have an abortion. Also, working on our water issues. We need to secure our water future. We know that, the Colorado River, where we get almost 40% of our water in this state, certainly Tucson has been very reliant on Colorado River water. Lake levels in our reservoirs are dropping. The river is drying up, and we need to do what we can to make sure that we safeguard our future. Finally, we need to renew the American dream and provide economic opportunity for all Arizonans. And this includes educational opportunity. This includes making Arizona the economic powerhouse it can be in the clean energy world as a result of our climate. And this also includes things like protecting Social Security and Medicare. And I have to say, the Republicans are fighting against these things. I'm fighting for them. We need, in order to secure that American dream, we need to move forward, not backwards. And that's what I'm focused on.
Okay, great. And a quick question is, how long have you lived in what is now the district, CD6?
Almost 18 years. I figure it out by basically my daughter's age. She was 1 month old when we moved here. She's almost 18.
Okay, great. And then a note I forgot to mention is we had invited the Republican candidate Juan Ciscomani to attend this. We didn't hear back from him, but we did recently hear back, And so we have him scheduled for September 8th at 10 a.m. So that'll be coming down the pipe. All right, so you mentioned a number of different issues. I'm going to ask you about some of them. I'd like to start off with, you have a background in environment. As you mentioned, Colorado River is kind of drying up. Lake Powell, Lake Mead are really low. As if you were elected to Congress, what actions would you take to ensure that Arizona has enough water?
Well, first of all, we are at a critical time right now. Actually, in a editorial that I published in your paper last week. Thank you for allowing me to have that voice out to your readers. I talked about the fact that, currently the states were given a deadline by the Department of Interior's Bureau of Reclamation, which is the sort of water master. They have ultimate authority over the Colorado River, especially the lower basin states. And they gave the states a deadline to come up with a plan for how they were going to cut back 2 to 4 million acre feet of water. And that was a determination of what would be needed to make sure that we save the Colorado River and it doesn't fall to such low levels that not only would our water deliveries be threatened, but also the ability of the dams to generate electricity, which powers millions of homes in the West. The states worked on it. They didn't come up with an agreement, and yet the Bureau of Reclamation, which had promised if they don't do it, we're going to do it, they didn't follow through with that either. So I feel like that's a failure in that we really need the federal government's authority to push all of the states to do their fair share. And right now, under existing agreements, most importantly, the Colorado Drought Contingency Plan, something that I worked on when I was in the state legislature. Under that, Arizona is the only one that is abiding by the mandatory cuts. And as a result of the further dropping of lake levels, those cuts are going to be even more severe next year, up to something like 592,000, almost 600,000 acre feet. We're cutting back. We need other states, specifically California. So as a federal official, as somebody in Congress, I would work to make sure that all states are working together, that we're working with our Department of Interior to make sure that all states are actually sharing this load. That's the only way it's going to get done. And that we're also putting into place ways of using less water, using our water more efficiently, conserving our water. Making sure that in agriculture, we have options for using less water, drip irrigation, that we're recycling our water, that we are constructing and using storage, both natural storage as well as man-made storage, like the Avra Valley storage basins that we have. When we have a big storm of monsoons, the monsoons here that are so fabulous, we should be capturing that water so that we can use it again. So there's a ton that we can do. We do need the federal government's help. Arizona just can't do it alone.
With the conservation measures you mentioned, what would be the role of the federal government in that? Would that be to provide some type of incentive to conserve water, or what would?
Sure. Yes, incentives would be a great way to do it. I think what we found from the Inflation Reduction Act is that incentives are kind of in vogue now, and they can be very, very effective. So yes.
Okay, all right. And you also mentioned another issue, abortion, right? So but now that Roe v. Wade's been overturned, a lot of the authority's been moved down to the states, but there has been talk of Congress passing some type of federal abortion law. What type of law would you like to see passed if Congress took that step?
Well, I would like to put Roe versus Wade back into law. I feel like that was a precedent that served us well for the past 50 years. It was a way of guaranteeing this, fundamental freedom of women to make their own decisions. It is a bit of a compromise around the issue of viability. It's worked well. A majority of Americans support it. a majority of Arizonans support it, and a majority of the voters in this district support it. So what I would like to do is, guarantee that in federal law. We've lost it as a constitutional right for now, but I think we should put it back. And I would, it's one of the first things I'd like to do in Congress would be to codify Roe versus Wade. We're in an untenable situation right now. Arizona's legal situation is chaotic. And really something like this, which is a fundamental healthcare issue, I think it's really gets into an area of privacy. It was protected within privacy rights previously under the Constitution. I don't think something like that should be up to the wills of one state does this and another state does that. This is fundamental. It's part of sort of the separation, I think, between our personal lives and the government. And I don't think that should differ based upon state boundary lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, I think you've kind of already addressed this a little bit, but this is a question I'm asking all the candidates. So in the abortion debate, there's a lot of attention focused on things like ectopic pregnancies on the one hand, and then late-term abortion on the other. But from what I gather, most abortions that happen in the country are people who they're already mothers. They're kind of they just don't want to be pregnant. So I'm just giving this hypothetical example. A 25-year-old woman gets pregnant and has no medical issues or anything like that, but just does not want to have the baby. Do you think that it should be legal for her to end the pregnancy?
Yes, I do. I think we should respect women to make their own healthcare decisions. She should be able to make that decision and consult with her doctor, with her family, with her religious advisors. And so long as that is within that Roe versus Wade framework, as it's been interpreted by the courts, I think we should respect her and leave that decision for her to make.
And another issue that has kind of come to dominate the national conversation is the 2020 election, the claim that it was stolen. And as a result of that claim, people are trying to pass a lot of laws that appears to restrict the ability of people to vote. When it comes to like laws related to voting, do you think that the federal government should pass a blanket law? And if so, what kind of law would you like to see?
I do think we need to guarantee voting rights at the federal level. I was serving in the Arizona legislature at the time that the Republican Party was pushing through, trying to push through many measures to weaken our voting laws, including rolling back the permanent early voting list, something that they did successfully. And I was always kind of aghast about that. Something like over 80% of Arizonans vote by mail. I can hardly think of something more popular than voting by mail. When I go and knock on doors and talk to voters, they're like, oh, I've gotten my ballot. I've been looking everybody up. They would just, wax eloquent on something like that. These are things that empower voters to make these decisions. And yet what we saw were falsehoods, lies, all seeming to come out of this big lie that Biden had stolen the election and that somehow our elections were corrupt, even though, there's absolutely no evidence of that. And of course, we've had the January 6th House committee that has gone into those details of the origin of that. So yes, from my experience, seeing what is happening at the state level of people indulging in this falsehood and lies to make it more burdensome to exercise, again, fundamental to our democracy, fundamental freedom to decide our own. The voters have to decide the elections, not the politicians. I do think we need federal protections for voting.
And that would be, you mentioned, early voting. You would want to have a federal protection for early voting. Are there other specific aspects of voting you would want protected?
I would like to make sure that people are not harassed at when they exercise their right to vote. I also support same day, registering people, that people can register when they, sign up to get their driver's license. Same day voter registration also as well. I think these are methods of voting that make the franchise available to people and are secure.
Okay. All right, then switching topics, your district is going to have a little bit of the border on it. You're also, being in Congress, you will be in charge of passing laws related to the border.
They've actually taken out part of the border. It's kind of bizarre. There's this little sort of, the Congressman Grijalva's current, the district he will be running for now includes some parts of the border that used to be in Ann Kirkpatrick's district. But yes, I would consider this a border district too.
Yeah. So
it has border.
Yes. So we have, in the last 2 years, we've had a lot more people coming across the border. And Arizona has seen an increase, not nearly as much as in Texas and other places, but there definitely has been a lot of people coming across the border. So I want to ask you, how do you view that? Do you see that as a problem? And what would you do? What would you like to see happen in terms of policy on the border?
Well, what's the problem is the criminal element that comes across the border, and we do need to secure the border. And I wouldn't give either party in Washington high marks on the border. I think Washington has failed us, and that's the Republican administration, and frankly, it's also a Democratic administration. Arizona is in a tough spot having the border. We do need, as I said, to secure the border, and that's because we want to make sure that drug trafficking, that we stop that, stop that cartel trafficking. Human trafficking is also, high levels of that. That's unacceptable. We have to crack down on that. But there's a humanitarian issue too. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are seeking a better life and coming to Arizona, to the Arizona border. We have an asylum process. That asylum process, I think, can be improved. We need to have an orderly asylum process, a lot more people to process those asylum applications, which people have a legal right to file for asylum in the United States. And yet there's all kinds of delays in doing that. And finally, this is all part and parcel of our immigration process. And we need fundamental immigration reform in this country, something that we've been kicking down the road for years now. And we need to start. Just think about our, dreamers, people who have lived their entire lives in the United States. They don't know any other country except the United States. And yet, they're going to school, they're trying to start families, they're trying to start businesses. And yet their lives are in limbo because we have not given them some kind of pathway to citizenship. And we also need to do that with respect to others who are here in the United States without proper documentation. So border is a big issue. It's complicated. It's not easily synthesized into little, bites. I would have to say the Republican Party spends its time with press conferences at the border, demonizing people and creating a lot of fear rather than working on the tough issues that we have.
All right, so let me ask you kind of a hypothetical again. Let's say that there is a guy from Mexico, rural Mexico, comes across the border illegally, doesn't go through the port or anything like that. And he is on his way to his cousin in Sacramento, California has a job for him. What should the federal government do with regard to that person?
Well, he doesn't have legal right to enter the country. He should come and apply for legal right to enter the country. There might be something I'm missing, but we have borders, mm-hmm. and people just can't walk right in and go visit their cousin. They need to have legal authorization. Okay. So if he has a claim to asylum, he can apply for asylum. If he has a visa, he can have a visa. If he has a work permit, there are various ways. But I do think we should reform their system. But he needs to have.
And do you think that Congress should, the way I understand it right now, a person like that just kind of can't get a visa. It just doesn't really exist. If they have a family member, then they can kind of work through it, but otherwise not really.
This is why we need reform. We need reform.
So do you think that Congress should create a visa program for a person from Mexico who has a job in Sacramento and wants to go work the job and send money home and then return home at some point?
I think that we should reform so that people who are ready and willing to work in the United States have a pathway to be able to apply for such work authorizations.
Okay. And then just my last question on the border, one of the big issues.
Which is not radical. We used to have it. I believe it was really pulled back during the Trump administration. So anyway, okay.
Okay. All right. So another big issue on the border is fentanyl. So that is there are tens of thousands of people every year are overdosing on fentanyl or inadvertently dying from fentanyl. What would you do with regard to fentanyl crossing the border?
Well, that is part of securing the border. That is part of building up the security infrastructure in a smart way to be able to to stop those shipments. A lot of that is going through the ports of entry. I do think it's going to be an improvement on the border for that. We finally have that 2-port solution there in terms of having a separate commercial port of entry. Representative Ann Kirkpatrick who sits on the Appropriations Committee, was very instrumental, along with other members of the Arizona delegation, to get the money for building that port of entry that'll alleviate some of the pressure and going through the one port in the Douglas area. So that is, I'd say, a huge priority, is to have the manpower, the structure to be able to stop that drug trafficking. Okay.
All right. So changing gears a little, you mentioned schools are very important to education. And, we all know here in Arizona, we don't really fund our schools that much. We have the expansion of the voucher program, and we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But at the federal level, if you're elected to Congress, what would you like to do with regard to education to improve education in Arizona?
Well, the federal government's been a pretty big funder of public education, and that's an area where we need to, continue that, and where needed, strengthen that. One has been the Title I program of federal funding to schools that have a certain percentage of free and reduced lunch. That's a large percentage of schools in Arizona. Nutritional programs come from the federal government. Also, we need to make sure that the federal government, follows through on the original intent for special needs and special education for students who have, under the IDEA Act, have special needs. And right now, local school districts are shouldering, most of the costs of the specialists and others in order to provide services for special needs students to be able to fully take advantage of our educational system. And that's wrong. Those are federal requirements. Federal funding should follow those requirements. And when I was in the Arizona legislature, that was an area that I worked on, proposing legislation to increase the state funding for students with special needs, which we got done. Not nearly enough, but something to help the pressure on the schools. So I think also, the federal government can help in terms of helping community colleges. One of the things I'm concerned about is, tuition keeps on increasing. It has more than doubled since I've been here in Arizona. The cost of college at our state universities has gone up, and it's gone up across the board, across the United States. And of course, this is making college less affordable, more out of reach for middle and low income students. And that's something that we've got to address.
And this is more topical than I normally ask, but Biden just canceled or forgave, whatever the correct verb is, student loans and added new parameters for student loans going forward. What do you think about what Biden did?
Well, I'm disappointed that the Biden plan did not address the issue of increasing tuition. So what I'm afraid of is, we're going to go right back to where we are today, $1.6 trillion of debt, because we haven't addressed the fundamental problem that is driving this. I also would have liked to have seen it be paid for. But I have to say, there are a lot of students that are, a lot of people who are older, who are really being dragged down by what was a very small amount of debt. Something like, a large percentage of what we're talking about is people who borrowed very little money, less than $10,000. And yet many of them never ended up with a college degree. They may have dropped out. They may have only taken a couple of courses. Their school may have gone out of business, as we've seen with many for-profit schools. And yet they are being burdened by this debt that keeps on mounting. So I think that the plan is going to help a lot of people get on with their lives, but we've got to fix the bigger problem of escalating tuition.
Okay. All right, I have one more question from me, and then we'll move into the reader questions. We get a lot of letters to the editor and guest opinions, a lot of interest, a lot of concern about mass shootings. And so mass shootings. Yeah, mass shootings. And so what do you think the federal government can do to stop mass shootings or somehow help us get through the situation?
Well, the issue of gun violence is, it's horrific. It's on the rise. There's mass shootings, but of course there's gun violence that's not isolated with mass shootings. High rates of suicides with by guns. So I am proud to say that I'm a Moms Demand Action gun sense candidate. I do favor comprehensive background checks, and I know that we've made some more progress towards having those kinds of checks as a result of what the Congress passed pretty recently, and the compromise that was brokered in the U.S. Senate, which is a big step forward. And I have to say, this is very personal to me. I do have a daughter who's school age. I'm one of those parents who, when she was in middle school, got one of those calls that you never want to get from a child, where, they're huddled under a desk, and it's because they're in lockdown because there's somebody with a gun outside. And that is terrifying, and that is something that we should not have in our society. Thank God for, it did not result in any kind of harm. It was resolved quickly, but it certainly brought the issue home to me in a very personal manner. And, I support the Second Amendment. It's in our Bill of Rights, but that doesn't mean we can't have common sense measures to reduce the chances of violence. Obviously, violence comes from many, many different areas, but there are things that we can do that people favor, people understand, would reduce the risk. And one of those is having those comprehensive checks, things like, private sales in gun shows. I think those should be subject to a background check. That's just a huge loophole that we have not closed. We need to close it.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give you some questions from our readers. Let's see here. We have one is which committees would you like to sit on if you were elected?
That is a tough question because there's so many I would like to sit on. I would love to sit on the Energy Committee of the Natural Resources Committee, the Energy Subcommittee. So I would like to be on that Natural Resources and Water Committee. I think that would really tap into my background and what I can bring to Congress and, top line issues for Arizona, investments in clean energy. This is a real pathway to our future. As I often say, we can be the Persian Gulf of solar here in Arizona with our climate. And it's such a great source of jobs and economic growth for us. Also, the Labor and Education Committee would be very, very attractive to me. That would tap into my interest in and background in education, and especially in terms of, how we can put the pieces together to make sure that people do get a quality education, that we're treating our teachers well and encouraging them, and we're properly helping states and local school districts.
Okay.
So I'd say those would probably be the top two. Of course, I would love to be on the Appropriations Committee if I have a shot to get on that as well.
Okay. We have a question about the border. Would you support removing sections of the border wall to increase biodiversity? I think this has to do with wildlife being able to go back and forth across the border. And right now they can't in most places.
Well, the border wall has certainly been not good for the environment, and that has been I often talk about how the border walls are a 13th century solution to a 20th century problem. I know most recently there's been issues about plugging in some holes where there's been real safety issues. So before I took things down, I want to make sure that we're not making things unsafe for other people. So I'm not sure I've got a blanket answer there, but certainly the wall has not been good for our wildlife.
Okay. All right, we have since we're talking about the border, we got another one here. Do you think that it's an issue that President Biden has not visited the border?
Yeah, I think our president should visit the border. Absolutely. Yeah, and I visited the border. It's an important area. It's an important issue of as we've been talking about. Yeah, President Biden should visit the border.
Okay. And we have, if you're elected, who would you support as Speaker of the House?
I don't even know who's running. Let's not put the cart before the horse. I'm focused on my race. I am trying to hold this seat. If I'm able to hold this seat, I'll contribute to the Democratic Party holding their majority in Congress, and we'll see who steps up to the plate to run for that honor. We need the best person, and somebody who I can trust will listen to me and listen to the voters of Arizona.
Okay, this is about guns. Would you consider a ban or age limit on the purchase or possession of assault rifles?
Yes, especially the age. I think that we have seen that this is an issue, and I think that making sure that people are mature enough for something like that is reasonable.
Okay, and do you have a sense of what age you would want to be the minimum?
I think I would certainly consider an age restriction of 21.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this is interesting. If elected, what would be your status at the U of A College of Law?
I would be, I believe, on some kind of a permanent leave, and that is what I am on right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Those are, I think. Oh, okay. We got one more. Would you support President Biden campaigning for you?
It's the President of the United States. I would enjoy the opportunity to tell him exactly the way I feel about issues. I would, if I had the opportunity to speak to him face to face and say, get your act together about the border, President Biden, help out Arizona on what the challenges we have on the border. And also, President Biden, help us out with respect to the water issues on the Colorado River. So access to the President of the United States is important. And that's what I would be looking for if I had that kind of opportunity.
All right, we got another question that this has to do with the new IRS staff. And this one is, I can tell you from the letters to the editors that we get, a lot of people care about this, and a lot of people, I think, are a little bit unclear on what's the deal with the 87,000 IRS agents. So I wanted to add this question here is, why did you support the hiring of 87,000 IRS agents to audit the middle class?
Why did I support that? First of all, I'm running for office right now. So that was not a vote that I took, but I do support the Inflation Reduction Act. It's got fabulous things here for Arizona in terms of building up our economy in the clean power sector. And recall, this is also the bill that is going to help us crack down on the cost of prescription drugs for Medicare beneficiaries, cap the cost of insulin. And part of the way it's going to fund our ability to make sure that people are not paying crazy amounts for, prescription drugs, how we can jumpstart our renewable energy economy, build that EV charging infrastructure, is to make sure that people are paying their taxes. So my understanding is there's actually a cutoff. It's not, I think that there's some kind of cutoff. It's only people with incomes over $400,000, I believe, that people who should be paying their taxes. So we're not talking about new taxes. We're talking about people paying their taxes. I pay my taxes. I hope you pay your taxes. I hope the reader who submitted that question pays their taxes. This is part of the bargain. We pay our taxes. We also have input into our government and what we tax and who is taxed. But the tax law is the tax law. And if we need to enforce it to make sure that people pay their taxes, well, that's just fair. Everybody has to do their fair share of paying their taxes.
Okay. All right. So we've been on here for about 40 minutes, which is a good long time. We've covered a lot of ground. But before we end, I want to give you the opportunity. Is there an issue that we haven't touched on that you think is important?
You know, the only thing I would like to say is this is a critical race, and this is a critical time in our country. And I think that it is critical because, to be frank, the Republican Party has gotten so extreme. And this is now really a race between, I think, a candidate such as myself, with experience representing a good portion of this district in the state legislature, with deep ties in this community, who wants to roll up our sleeves and, work on the challenges we have, from water to education to economic opportunity. And then on the other side, we've got, some real extreme candidates for the Republican Party. And so really, we are asked to be the grown-ups, I think, and keep our country on the right path and not veer off into, the big lie and into dismantling things like basic healthcare for women, basic dignity for women in this by taking away this right to abortion, and go off in the direction of these very extreme candidates, such as, Secretary of State, who keeps a treason list, who was just fined $75,000 for in legal fees for filing suit against somebody for exercising their, First Amendment rights. A governor candidate who wants to defund the FBI, and a U.S. Senate candidate who has favorably quoted the Unabomber. I mean, this is kind of the extreme. And my Republican opponent, frankly, in this race, has not disavowed any of these candidates. And I would, from what we can tell, he's a loyal foot soldier, and that's where the Republican Party is, loyal foot soldier to follow in the footsteps of this increasingly radical Republican Party. So my ask of your readers, of the voters out there, is to reject that trend. Let's get to work on the issues that we need to get work on: education, our environmental issues, our water issues, our great opportunities here in the economic sector. And I think that's my platform. And I think that's many of the Democratic candidates who are running right now. So thank you so much for listening to me. And I hope I've answered your questions. And if I haven't, please email me. There's information on my website, www.engelforarizona.com, and ask me those questions there. Be happy to respond. And thank you so much for having me. And thanks for considering supporting me in November.
All right. So yes, thank you so much for taking 45 minutes to answer questions from us and our readers. We really appreciate that. Thank you for the readers who showed up, and for the readers who watch this later on. Thanks for watching it. Our next one is tomorrow at noon. We'll have Dana Almond, the Democratic candidate for a House seat in LD 17. And as I said earlier, Juan Ciscomani, who's running against Kirsten Engel, will be September 8th at 10 a.m. So once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kirsten, for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.